Shalom, I am Rabbi Michael Panitz, speaking to you from the pulpit of Temple Israel in Norfolk, Virginia. I'd like to discuss with you the following question and an answer. What do you put on a suddenly empty pedestal? What do you put on a suddenly empty pedestal? And I want to tell you the Jewish answer that could help heal America. This week, we observe a strange convergence of past and present. This coming Saturday night, July 17th, 2021, we will gather, as we have done for 1,950 years, to mourn the destruction of our unique Jerusalem temple. That anniversary will come one short week after the removal of the statues of two Confederate generals from a public park in Charlottesville, Virginia. It was the removal of those two statues that back in 2017 was the center of a horrendous controversy and a tragic loss of life in the so-called Unite the Right rally. On the surface, these events, the destruction of the Jerusalem temple and the removal of these statues, are quite dissimilar. The Roman army's destruction of the Jerusalem temple, a disaster in itself, was also accompanied by a massive enslavement of Jewish prisoners of war and Jewish civilians. So many Jews were captured by the Roman legions and auctioned in Roman slave markets that contemporary slave traders complained of the glut on the market. By contrast, however the quote-unquote lost cause apologists try to prettify the subject, Generals Lee and Jackson were fighting to preserve a slave-owning society. The destruction of the Jerusalem temple was a sad landmark in the annals of enslavement, whereas the defeat of the Confederacy was a step forward, however partial and incomplete, towards the wider enjoyment of freedom. Beneath the surface dissimilarity, however, we find an intriguing parallel. What happens when a symbol is removed? For Judaism, the loss of the central sanctuary in the year 70 proved to be a decisive moment in the history of the synagogue. There had been synagogues before the year 70, both in the Jewish diaspora and in the land of Israel. While evidence is unfortunately incomplete, we know of synagogues in Jewish communities in Egypt functioning as a place of public worship as early as 2,200 plus years ago. We also have records of the synagogue in Israel about 2,000 years ago, serving as a place where the Torah was publicly read and expounded. We know this from Jewish sources and even from the New Testament Gospels. It was also a gathering place, as is shown by the Hebrew name for synagogue, Beit Knesset, House of Assembly, and it's still known to this day as a Beit Knesset. But the synagogue of that era, before the year 70, was at most an outer outpost of public religious life. It was built to face the temple, and in its functioning, it respected the prerogatives of the temple as the sole sanctuary devoted to biblical-style sacrificial worship, conducted by men of priestly descent. The Jerusalem temple was the center of the Jewish world. After 70, in a Jewish world that had lost its center, the synagogue developed along with a new era in our religion. Religious life changed fundamentally for our ancestors when the temple was destroyed. The new synagogues liberally dotting the landscape where Jews lived in the Galilee, in the Golan, and in the Jewish diaspora. Those new synagogues did not replicate what had happened in the Jerusalem temple. They served as locales for a radical reorientation of Jewish religious life. What changed in this new synagogue Judaism? First, egalitarianism replaced dynasty. The poorest of the poor could and did rise to eminence as leading rabbis, with no claim of descent from Aaron the high priest, no lineage to lean on. Second, in place of the smoke of sacred barbecue, the air of the synagogue was filled with words. Words of prayer, quoted words of Torah, ever-changing words of interpretation. Third, whereas in the minds of the pilgrims and of pious Jews worldwide, the temple symbolized God's promise fulfilled, the synagogue existed in a mental construct that this is an imperfect and a broken world. Among the words chanted fervently in the synagogue were the Musaf prayers for Sabbath and festivals, petitioning God to send the Messiah and rebuild the temple. The synagogue was frankly provisional. For the present, however, and for as long as these present conditions might endure, the synagogue would keep Judaism healthy, and it would keep Jews solidly embraced in the still and always relevant covenant with God. The synagogue of the post-70 era would be more or less familiar to us today. Whereas, on the other hand, we would feel as if we were visiting some other religion were we to travel in a time machine and observe the Jerusalem temple services. The reorientation of Jewish life that was accomplished in and through the synagogue is still with us. The lesson of Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of the month Av, the date of the destruction of the temple. Its lesson for our fractured American body politic in 2021 should emerge from this analysis of the rise of the synagogue. The empty pedestals relieved of the 6 tons of statue await new statuary, new symbols. The statues were monuments to a blighted vision of America, in which the accident of birth could trump the soaring rhetoric of our visionary founders. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. This is our country at its best. But it did not live up to the best. Not in 1776, when the framers of the Declaration of Independence themselves held men and women in bondage. Not in 1877, when federal troops retreated from the South and allowed the Ku Klux Klan and the Jim Crow codes to subvert the progress of freedom. And not in recent times, with the weakening of legislative and judicial accomplishments of the civil rights era. Yes, our history has seen tides and countertides. The removal of the symbols of the glorification of enslavement a week ago are a moment of forward progress. Now it remains to be seen what will be put on these suddenly empty pedestals, both literally and figuratively. In 2017, when the statue of Robert E. Lee came down in Baltimore, some activists erected a sculpture of a pregnant African American woman on that pedestal. Their action was extra-legal, as was the vandalism that brought their statue down within days. Neither that action nor the counteraction are good models for what we as Americans need to follow. We need to embrace the true potential of our national slogan, E pluribus unum, out of the many, one. We need to believe in and work for an America that transcends identity politics, where the content of one's character truly counts for more than the color of one's skin, or the language of one's faith, or the private choices that are between our conscience and our Creator. America has an opportunity, even in polarized times, such as 2021. To quote Abraham Lincoln, the better angels of our nature are never absent. We can summon them and let them guide us. Jews did that nearly 2 millennia ago. America, cultivate the goodness to do that today. Amen.